Hey guys, it's Matt. Today we're going to talk about environmental issues, what they are, and how to stop them from killing your real estate deal. So, more specifically, the environmental issue we're going to talk about today are underground fuel tanks. Those could be any types of fuel from gasoline to fuel oil, whatever it is. Back in the day, I'm talking about many, many years ago, there wasn't the awareness to damage the environment that these types of things had. So they would just go and take tanks, dig a hole in the ground, bury it in the ground, and hey, we don't have to worry about it, don't have to think about it, it'll just stay in there forever. No big deal. If it leaks a little bit, what's the concern? Of course, now we've discovered that those things are damaging to the environment. The whatever that leaks out of them can get all the way down into the groundwater and can cause issue with well water. There's all kinds of problems that they can cause, and most importantly, it's regulated by the government about cleaning up spills like that, because you as the owner of a property, if it's discovered that you have a fuel oil tank in the basement or in the yard of a property you own that's leaked, that becomes an environmental hazard that has to get reported to the local environmental protection agency, and it has to get cleaned up properly and stuff like that. So it can become a major and also expensive issue in cleaning these things up. If you end up taking ownership of a property, that there becomes a spill that happened or a leakage in one of these things that happened later, it can fall back on you. And that can be extremely expensive. I've seen owners having to pay tons and tons of money to mitigate these things before they sell, that's why it's extremely important for you as a buyer to discover these types of things before you close. It's part of your due diligence for you to go and discover any type of underground oil tank or underground anything that you might need that you'll end up taking ownership of, whether you like it or not, because you own everything that's under the ground on your property too, right? And if it leaked while you own it, that's on you. So you want to discover these things before you close. So we're in the middle of two deals right now, both of which had underground oil tanks or underground tanks. The first one is a 7-unit apartment building that we're buying, and we discovered out in the yard there was a little fuel fill pipe that was sticking up at the sidewalk, and it looked like it was an abandoned pipe. Hey, who knows? But we looked at it closer, and it's actually a fill port for an oil tank. And upon doing further investigation, we had a company come out and do a radar study, and they discovered that there was a 2,000-gallon tank sitting in the yard next to this apartment building. The owner of the building had owned the building for 15 years and didn't even know it was there because he didn't look for this little fill port that we found. So it's all about doing a full site inspection, looking for issues like that. And you can also do what we did on the next purchase that we did, which I'll tell you guys about. We did a phase 1 environmental study. You can hire companies that'll do a phase 1, and what a phase 1 is, along with many other things that they do, one thing that they do that's really important, they will look back through records to see what the property was used for many, many years ago. We're buying a larger apartment complex out in Pennsylvania, and there's a side parking lot to the building. It was discovered that side parking lot in the 40s and 50s was a gas station. Whoa. Well, even gas stations now take their tanks and bury them in the ground. And back then they did that too. Back then they used metal tanks and buried them in the ground, which, as we know now, those tanks can rust. The gasoline that's in them can leak into the ground, and as we all know, that's not a very good thing. So they had to come out and do a soil sample study. They went and did that ground penetrating radar thing again, and for a good reason, we did all that, and we're very happy to find out that those tanks had been removed many, many years ago, and there's no environmental hazard, no damage to the soil. But again, I wanted to do that study up front to make sure that it's not there, because if we close and it's discovered later that there was a gas leak at the property, even if the leak happened all the way back in the 40s or the 50s or something like that, that still falls on us to remediate that, and that can be extremely costly. Most banks on your purchases are going to require that you do that too, because you could lose all your equity and end up losing the property perhaps, or losing your profitability, and it could fall back on them too, and on their asset, the collateral that they're loaning to you on. So a lot of banks on bigger commercial purchases will ask you to do a phase 1 and won't close with you until then. On smaller residential purchases, it makes sense to do some sort of even a physical inspection, like we did on the 7-unit building. We just discovered this little oil fill port. But you also want to ask the current owner if they're aware of anything. You want to ask them how long the property's been heated by the means that it is now, if it's natural gas, electricity. When's the last time you switched these things out, and what was it heated on before? If they happen to mention there was heated on fuel oil, then you want to find out where that tank was. Sometimes it's above ground, sometimes it might still be in the ground. So those are the things that you want to do, guys. Remember, you take ownership of all that stuff. You take ownership of the good, the bad, and the ugly for these properties once you own them. So it makes it's just good business to do a bunch of due diligence and discover exactly what it is you're taking ownership of before you close, because all that stuff becomes your responsibility. So if you've got any questions, ask them below. We'll get into a chat. We can talk about fuel oil tanks. We can talk about other environmental stuff like asbestos and even lead-based paints becoming an issue too these days. So we can talk about that. We can talk about maybe some stories you guys have had for discovering potential environmental issues at your properties that you guys have purchased. So thanks for watching. Have a great and profitable week. Take care.